So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We did a little sound check before. I'm just going to do it again. Make sure you can still hear me. If the trusty Paul is still out there, just ping me one more time in that chat box, since you know where it is now. Let me know you can actually hear what I am saying. In the meantime, as Paul's doing that, I'm going to assume the answer is yes and crack on, because I know your time is valuable, and I'm very grateful for you for joining me on this webinar. Now, what we are going to, good morning, Stephanie. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to start off with. Actually, Stephanie, is it morning where you are? It's 1 p.m. So I'm guessing you've either had a very tough day or you're in a different part of the world where it is still morning. However, whatever is the case, good morning back to you. Now, that's the first thing I want to do, is just normally when I speak at events, any of you that have seen me speak know it kind of gets a little bit lively. Stephanie says it's 5 a.m. God bless you for getting up at that time. Normally when I speak at events, it's kind of lively and we get a bit of energy happening in the room, and that generally involves either dancing around or giving everyone high fives or something ridiculous like that. So in the chat box, just ping in who you are, where you are, what time is it where you are, and let's sort of have some energy through that vehicle, if you will. What we're going to be talking about today is, I think, a big deal topic. Certainly as I travel around the world, it's something that people are talking about all the time, and that is, why is it so darn hard to hire experienced vets? And actually, we can include technicians and nurses there as well, right? And this has kind of led to something different happening in the labor market and the hiring market. There's a lot more people are starting to look at new graduates as a viable option for their practice, a lot more than would have previously considered that. And we're going to dig into some of the reasons as to, why it is we're having trouble hiring people. And then, okay, what implications does that have for the next generation of vets as we start to bring them into our practices? Have we really thought this through? What is our plan? I love having a plan for everything. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here today. So lots of people saying hello in the chat box just now. So Paul in sunny Birmingham, Lydia from Bristol, Sean, I'm guessing that's Sean Finch over in the US, Maxine in Bedford, Verity down in Kent, hello Verity, Caroline, wonderful Caroline Johnson is there, Nikki Green from Kansas, and Stephanie I know is in the US, and lots of other people weighing in. Anthony from Italy, you work with new graduates in Italy and Washington State. Look, tons of you weighing in there. It's really good to have you all on board. So let's get on with this. I'm going to try and run this an hour. We may overrun slightly. If I do and you've got to jump off the webinar, first of all, my apologies for that. There's a lot of cool content in here. I think you're going to get some awesome value. I'm recording this, and everybody that registered is going to be able to get a link to the replay. So I'm going to go not so fast to lose you, but fast enough we get some awesome value in there. Okay. So without further ado, let's keep going. And if at any point the sound breaks or the slides go dark or something like that, ping me in the chat room. I will be able to see that. But I am flying solo today, and I would rather focus on giving you a great presentation than fiddling around too much with the controls. Okay, so let's keep going. Why the hell are you here? Who am I to be teaching you any of this stuff or talking about any of this stuff? Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Dave Nichol. I've been a vet for almost to the day 19 years, and a manager of practices for the last decade, possibly longer than that now. And one of my great passions has always been educating, inspiring, training, and so I have gravitated towards looking after and training and bringing on the next generation of vets throughout my whole career. And I've been fortunate enough to work in some larger practices in the UK and been a performance coach for a very large practice in the southeast of England. And I've also had the great experience of owning my own hospitals out in Sydney. And I also travel the world speaking to and meeting and educating practice owners around the world. But one of the awesome things I get to do, and I do that, is I get to listen and hear what everyone else is experiencing. And I find that enormously valuable to be out there and really have a finger on the pulse globally, which is kind of cool. I also set up back 10 years ago, my first training programs for new graduates in the UK, and then I developed that into a graduate internship program, inverted commas, within my own hospitals in Sydney. And we took on a graduate, my commitment to the profession was irrespective of the fact that it may not have been the most brilliant decision for my business at the time, was to take on a new graduate, give them a great start in our profession, and set them on their way to a great career. Not necessarily with me forever, but just to give people the great start that I got in my career. And I just wanted to pay that um, that input from my previous employers. I want to pay that back to the profession. And at the end of this, I think if you don't already agree with me, and I'm probably speaking to quite a biased audience here, I think you probably will have some food for thought by the end of this. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. And if you are totally devoid of time, which none of you are, or in some way brain damaged and want to learn more, then you can head to my Facebook page at facebook.com/Dr. Dave Nichol. All right. So, philosopher from lots of yesteryears, Diogenes said, the foundation of every state is the education of its youth. And honestly, I'm going to pick some bones here today because I just don't think we're doing an awesome job here. And now I'm not throwing rocks at universities. I'm very much focusing on us. And when I say us, because I'm a small business owner, I own a veterinary hospital as well. And I think we collectively as a profession have been setting ourselves up for some of the problems we are now facing. Okay, so we're going to take a bit of a journey on this presentation. We're going to talk about the labor market, or the job market at large. We're going to talk about, solving the problem that I believe we've created for ourselves. And then I'm going to give you a couple of tools, or introduce you to a couple of tools that you can make use of, or you can take the principles from and apply them yourself in your own practice to, I hope, have some great outcomes, not just for your good new graduate, because of course if you look after them, they're going to look after you back, so that's good for your practice. It's good for your sanity if you've got your team on board, right? And it's also great for the broader profession further down in the years to come. Okay, so let's talk about this labor market, or this train wreck as I call it. Okay, and I'm going to start with this little poll. Some of you, I hope more than just some of you, I hope many of you will be familiar with Gallup. And Gallup do a research poll, and they do this, I think they do this every year. And I swear to God, either it's really lazy research or it never changes. And the poll, basically the question they ask is, how many of your people are actually genuinely engaged in their jobs and are doing the best work, the highest productivity, and are really coming into work just with that spring in their stride and loving it. Okay, so how many of your team are engaged? That was the question. And it turns out about a third of the people that we pay to come and work with us and spend more of our lives than we do with our families, just about, a third of them love us. 50% of them, they show up for the paycheck, right? And 20% of them hate your guts, or my guts, or whoever they're working for's guts. And if you can relate to this, ping me in the chat box. Have you, honestly, and don't, you don't have to do if you don't want to, but have you right now got somebody in your team you absolutely categorically know hates coming to work? Not necessarily hates you, because it's probably not personal, but hates coming into your practice. If that's happening in your practice right now, ping it in the chat box. Fess up, lance the abscess. That's the start of the point of the doing something about it. Okay, I just think this is a crazy situation, though, right? Because how much more productive could our practices be? How much more fun? Nikki, let the haters go. Well then, how much more fun could it be for us to have, just to create organizations and environments and cultures where people love coming to work? Okay, I'm going to drop the words here. I'm going to say blame culture. There's the thing that that's one of the things that people hate about veterinary practices, and it's ubiquitous. It's happening everywhere to some degree or other. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at. Now, I got a little poll for you here. Let's see if I can work this doofalaki, okay? And my first question is, how long is it taking you to hire a new vet? Okay, and I'm talking about experienced vets here, not new graduate vets, okay? So I'm just going to ping this out there, starting the poll. So there should be on the right-hand side of your screen, assuming yours is looking the same way as mine. There's a little poll there. How long is it taking to hire new vets? So if you would start answering ping in your answers there. That would be kind of awesome. I have got one request from Tracy to come on as a speaker. Tracy, I actually think I might crash the room if I do that at the minute. If you would ping me your question or point in the chat box, then I'll get to you. And I don't want to sync the webinar like 10 minutes in. So ping me your thing in the chat box and we'll get to you. As I say, I'm flying this solo, so I'm dreadfully concerned I might wreck the webinar if I give you a microphone right now, and then I'm going to have like another 100 people want it as well and start a big argument. So forgive me if I don't go there right now. So we got those chats there. Okay, cool. We got enough happening there. So look at that. So you can, I think, see the results there. So some of you are having no problems. 33% of you is taking 3 to 4 months. Like, I feel like that's a reasonable time for an experienced vet. That's certainly one, maybe 2 to 3 months was always what I used to experience when we started hiring, or when I started hiring a long while ago. But look at this, we're over 50% or 17% or 5 to 6 months, 25% or 6 to 12 months, 17% of you cannot hire an experienced vet. That's insane, isn't it? Now, my next question, and this isn't one I'm going to set up a poll for, this is one I want you just to consider. What's your staff turnover rate? Because, national averages, and it varies by industry, so I'm sure McDonald's has a very high turnover of relatively low paid, relatively low skilled staff members. But industries that require high degrees of training like ours, really we should be expecting a much more stable workforce, or certainly a team within our businesses. And I'll tell you now that I have experienced before I started implementing and before I started learning about leadership, I was definitely experiencing 15 to maybe even 25% turnover in big veterinary teams, and that's a devastating blow, because how important it is for vets to be settled and for clients to really form bonds of trust, and also teams to form bonds of trust, because as soon as somebody leaves and someone else comes in, what's happening is we've just completely torn up the dynamic of the team and it's got to resettle. So the staff turnover rate is actually pretty big, and I've consulted with practices where 100% of the team are turning over in a year. I mean, that's just insane, isn't it? And really, I think certainly employment studies show like that should be closer to sort of 5 to 10%. Now, I hesitate to give you that as a target figure because it is very industry specific, but come on, we can do better than 25%, right? Okay, so you're all here to talk about new graduates. So of course we're up for new graduates, because frankly, a lot of us just don't have a choice, okay? And if we've not got a choice, then I think there's some problems, because if we are experiencing national problems with recruitment, we have to think about where the hell those problems are coming from and look downstream to stop us making those same errors in the future, frankly, with a group who are far, far more vulnerable and less resilient and less exposed to the big bad world than experienced vets in the past would have been. Okay, I hope that's kind of making some sense. Okay, so what's going on? Why can't we hire some people? All right, well, I hear some things like, and feel free to bounce in the chat box what your opinion is here. But what's going on? Why can't we hire people? Well, one of the first things I hear people complaining about and saying is a big problem is the fact we're just hiring the wrong sort of people into our practices, right? We are hiring people who are too cerebral, they're too focused on passing exams, not practical, they can't handle the real world, okay? So it's the university's fault. And then I hear they're all so young. Like, all they want to do is take selfies of each other and post stuff on Instagram and Snapchat, and I don't get it. And who are these people anyway? And how did they get a degree? Jesus, who are they? Okay, millennials. Like, they're just so entitled. They don't want to do work. When I was a lad, we used to work 72 hours straight on call with no food, water, or sleep, and that was what we thought was great and where we got our experience. Okay, so we blame changing attitudes over time and the fact that this generation seem not to have the work ethic of the last generation. And of course, the biggie, women. Let's blame women. Why not? Now, I'm safe-ish saying that in a webinar. because I'm unaccompanied here. And please, I trust you understand my sense of humor here, and you'll see where this joke's going in a little second. But we blame women, we blame feminization, actually, not women. But with the fact of the matter is that all women are going to have babies and they're going to have families, and then they don't want to come back to work, and so they're focused on something completely different, and so that's where all of our talent goes. Okay, so they're the three biggies that I hear. Is anyone buying any of that though? I mean, I think the problem is some of us do, and I've got a really big problem with all three of those things. Okay, I'm back to slides up here. Okay, because each of them, this one is about blaming universities, this one is about blaming a different generation, and this one is about blaming an entire 50% of the whole workforce for what's going on. And I don't think any of that's true. All right, I think this is what's going on. I think we suck at looking after our people. End of story. Okay. And we're going to go through some evidence for that. I'm not just picking this out of thin air. And I get the sense when I give this presentation in front of a live audience that, or an audience is in the same room as me. I hope you're all live. That is something that is uncomfortable for us to hear, but is absolutely true. Because what's really going on here is we are not very good at leadership, and we're not very good at organizational management, organization building. We're not very good at managing culture proactively. All of these things kind of happen to us. And why would we be good at it? We never learned a dang thing about this at university, right? And so then we learn from our peer group before, who obviously were really good at all of this, and taught us everything they know. And often that meant, sorry fellas, but grumpy old men who had very little in the way of emotional intelligence skills and didn't have to run businesses with great concern for people because they were operating in a market that was nothing like as competitive now. People didn't have the choice in where they worked. You had practices that had a local monopoly on clients. They also had a local monopoly on recruitment and hiring people. So you didn't have to be. Like, if you didn't want to work for me, then where else were you going to work? It was hard. So bad behaviors were tolerable at that point. Doesn't mean the outcomes on the individuals were better. They just didn't have an option. Now, that just isn't true. And I think our poor leadership is causing people to go and gravitate to practices where there are strong leadership habits and strong cultures. But we know that a bunch of them, a bunch of our talent, a bunch of those people that spent their whole life since they were 10 years of age wanting to be vets and nurses, just give up on the dream and leave and never come back. And I think that's kind of a tragedy. So I think the first thing we have to be genuinely aware of and honest with ourselves is that probably as bosses and as practice owners, if we want to operate as victims and continue to blame other people, we're not going to fix this problem. And by the way, a bunch of those things, like universities may be hiring, bringing in people that are very cerebral. Millennials may have a different attitude, and that might have an impact. And yes, there's an 80% gender bias. But I think as long as we use those things as our excuses for the problem, we're never going to solve the problem. And I think there is ample evidence to say that millennials and ladies who choose to have families are all very keen and very happy to work in practice where they're respected and the cultures are awesome. So the question is, how do we go about creating those cultures? Well, look, we're going to focus on new graduates here. Okay. And now that we're kind of being honest with ourselves, I think it's important that we start to think about solving the problem. And for new graduates, since you're all here to learn about new graduates, that means learning more about new graduates. Now, these guys are real graduates from the RVC. I had the pleasure of interviewing them for my podcast. Blatant podcast plug for Blunt Dissection. If you like podcasts, go to iTunes, search for Blunt Dissection. But I interviewed 5 of them, and I really wanted to get a feel for what they were experiencing. It's 20 years since I walked out of Glasgow University Vet School into the real world, and I wanted to get a real feel for what these individuals were experiencing. And this was not set up. I didn't know how many of them were going to show up. And guess what showed up? 5 graduates, 4 were female, 1 was male, and they were great fun, and they were very good people to interview. But I want to dig into some of the things I found. And so I dug into the Vet Futures report, the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons manpower survey, my interviews with new graduates, and also there's a couple of Facebook groups that are really interesting, and it's anecdotal to an extent, but you get a feel and a sense of the conversation, something you just don't get from the more aggregate survey data. And the two together, I think, are very valuable to look at. So we kind of know who new graduates are. Certainly in the UK, they're graduating 22 to 24 years of age. In the US, then that's probably going to be 3 or 4 years later, because veterinarians do a second degree before they graduate. And we know that there's a strong gender bias. But let's dig into why they're having problems, okay? So here are the reasons, and this is from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons survey of recent qualifiers. It's back in 2013. But let's look down this list on the right-hand side. So this is the reason their first ever job did not meet their needs, okay? And so the position was too lowly paid. 10% of people thought it wasn't well paid enough. 22.8%, not enough support, professional support. Next one down, didn't receive enough emotional or social support. Okay, we are pretty much up to 40% of respondents now. Okay, moving down there, the next couple of biggest numbers are going to be not in the location I wanted. Well, new graduates typically wouldn't have been getting jobs within bigger cities where everyone wants to work. We'd had to move to rural areas to get work in practices that struggle to recruit people in there. And so that's not that big a surprise, and not the type of clinical practice I wanted. Again, I'm not surprised by that, because you graduate, like it's like choosing to go to vet school when you're 17. Like, how the heck do you know what you want to do with the rest of your life when you're 17? I feel very fortunate that I still want to do that thing, right? But the same when you graduate, like you can't say for certain what you're going to do for the rest of your days. Okay, so I'm not surprised by that. But look at the two big categories put together as all support. Money is a very low risk factor. And then let's look at the weighting on the significance for those reasons, okay? So the most important of those reasons, like over half of them said professional support. And what does that mean? It means we're chucking them right in at the deep end, and we're not looking after them. Now, that is something that's completely in our control, right? So then the reason for quitting their first role, and again, scrolling down there, general job satisfaction. Poor management, workload, long hours, salary, training, career progression. So actually, poor management is it's the biggest category, but I feel like that's a complete bucket term. And frankly, you could have stuck job dissatisfaction, workload, long hours, and salary all into there, because they're all completely controllable, as is career progression. Completely controllable if you're a manager, business owner, or leader. Okay. And interestingly, 12.9% temporary positions. So I think a lot of people hire new graduates into internship style roles, and that's a safety net for them. But it also is a good way of getting a new graduate in, because realistically, you don't know if they're going to be absolutely awesome or not, and it's going to take time to train them. And if you're taking the first plunge with new graduates and you've not yet got your systems in place, this can be a good option for you, because there's a break point. Everybody knows about it. It's all out there in the open. And at the end of 12 months, if it's not working out for you, then you can go your ways having given it your best shot. Okay. So now we get some data, and these are quotes I took out of the Facebook group. So there's no names, and it's all, I'm not going to tell anybody who these people were. I'm privileged to be part of that group, but I thought the comments were enlightening and illuminating, shall we say. Okay, so being intellectually stimulated is nice. A lack of that is one of the reasons I left, but I enjoyed client interaction. Okay, so intellectual stimulation. People want to do more than just scale and polish teeth or stitch up lumps. I think we all understand that. Okay, now I'm breaking one of my major rules. Whenever I speak, I barely have anything on slides whatsoever except pictures, and I just did a vomit fest of words for you. So I apologize for that, but it's powerful stuff. Okay, the lack of experienced vets to staff practices has been present for the last decades, having the knock-on effect that young graduates are recruited into roles that should be filled by far more experienced staff. The knock-on effect is they do not receive enough support, and so struggle to progress and develop Amen. I couldn't agree more with that. And that is something that I've heard echoed time and time again. Okay. Um, and this one's big, isn't it? I mean, it's not, mental health shouldn't be a buzzword, and I hope it isn't. It's a very hot topic just now, and thank goodness that that is the case, because we need all the help we can get. But the mental health, the stress, the pressures that are on us now, they just weren't there. I don't think 20, certainly not 30 years ago, because the range, like, heck, if you're trying to treat a case of otitis, there's like 10 different options you can choose. And so the complexity of what we do is far greater. The expectation of clients is far greater. Insurance means that the price people pay is higher. And of course, then the more you pay for something, the bigger the risk and the downside if it doesn't work out. So there definitely is more pressure, okay? And we just don't get that much mental health support, all right? And then from the podcast, one of the questions I asked the group was, if you could give your future employer one piece of advice and what you want from them, what would it be? And you have to listen to the podcast. I've summarized here so as not to beat you to death with words. But one of them was, be patient. Just remember that you were once where I am. Okay, so patience and empathy all rolled into one. Support us. Give us. Don't just tell us we do something wrong and then not show us how to do it right. Like, give us the support. Like, these guys are seedlings; they need nurtured in the hothouse before you let them in. You replant them in the main garden, right? And feedback, not just when it's bad, but when it's good, and also the ratio of feedback. Like, we're so, like, in practice, we're so dang busy. Often what we do is we see someone doing something wrong, we tell them with a sharp tongue what we think of what they did wrong, and then we get on because we're a bit uncomfortable with the conflict that might arise there. And then we feel a bit guilty afterwards, okay? That's not good feedback. And also we suck at catching people in the act of doing something right. We actually suck at giving people feedback that's useful to them, i.e. describing what they just saw, telling them why that's a problem, telling them what they could try in order to improve things, or asking them what they might try in order to improve things, and then agreeing a plan as to how to execute that change in future. Okay, there's so many things that we can do, and they're all kind of leadership skills. All right, so now we know a little bit more about our new graduates. Let's talk about the next step. Okay, and we're going to get into a little bit of psychology here. I think this is super, super important that everybody understands this. And there are a number of models for happiness, and this is one for human needs. There's all sorts of psychological modeling. This is one I think is profoundly useful and revealing for us. Now, in order to be happy, in order to feel satisfied, these are the 6 basic needs that all humans will seek out in one form or other. And we can seek them out in positive ways, or we can seek them out in quite negative ways. And so they are certainty. So that is, I guess this is taking us back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's a certain amount of parallel with this here, but certainty is about security. And I want you to think about the job of a vet as we go through this. So we'll come back to that thought in a little second. So the first need is certainty. So how in control of our lives are we? The second one is variety, like how able to change our immediate situation or our emotional state. How able to do that are we? Do we have options? Significance. So how important are we to the world around us? Like, what is our view of our place in the world? And is it something that we are comfortable with? Does it match up with our expectation of where we should be? Connection, and actually it should be love first. So humans need love. And if they can't get love, then what we need is connection. I just said they like I'm some sort of alien or something like that. The next one up is growth. We need the opportunity to grow and to develop, to get better. And then the final one is contribution to something bigger than ourselves. Now, when you go down through this list, how high? Like, if we scored each one of these on 0, where 0 is we don't tick that box at all as an industry or as a profession, to 10, we completely knock that out the park, and with bells on, we home run type score. How do we score? Well, certainty. is the veterinary profession stable? Does it provide a regular number of jobs? Does it provide good job security? Does it provide I'm not saying it provides an awesome salary, but above what you need to survive and live well. It ticks all the boxes there. So it gives us great certainty. Do you have options as a veterinary surgeon or as a nurse? Can you control where you work? Can you control your emotional status? Are you able to, and do you get time away from the coal face? Like, the answer is yes, you should be able to do all of those things. Are you significant? Do you feel significant? Well, the clue is in the doctor at the front of our name and the string of letters after our name. Absolutely significant. And connection, like, my goodness, I actually can't think of some way that the veterinary profession is not. This must be the number one profession for connection and love, right? And we've got three bites of the cherry. We've got our patients, we've got our clients, and we've got our team around us. We've got so many places to connect with, okay? Can we grow? Absolutely. The amount of money poured into CPD budgets or continuing education budgets, and the opportunity to learn, develop, to continue to challenge yourself is awesome. And then contribution, like, are we contributing to something greater than ourselves? Well, how do you guys feel? Do you get the warm, mushy feeling when the animal goes home to its owner and you know that you created something amazing in their home life? Like, that's an important relationship. It's one of the foundations of families these days, is that pet. They teach us so much. They give us so much love. And in this world, we crave those things. So are we able to contribute on so many levels? Like, we contribute to the food chain. Like, every bit of meat that goes on anybody's plate anywhere in the world is passed by a veterinarian. Okay, so we absolutely contribute across the board. So my concern there is, well, what's the damn problem then? Why is there so much pain, and why do people not enjoy working in our practices? Okay, and and if you take nothing else away from this webinar, keep these six things in your brain. Like, screen grab that, write it down, do whatever you've got to do. Because if you can start ticking these boxes in a positive way, then by golly, you are going to be creating a place that's worth working, and people, like, you will have people coming to you to work for you. I absolutely guarantee you that that's the case. Okay. Here are three things then that I think we need to work on in order to solve our problem. And I've put them in traffic light order, because some of these things I think we do well, and some of these things I think we suck at. Okay. So starting at the top, leadership, and this is a humongous area and far too big an area. I mean, really, when I'm coaching people, I work with them for a year on leadership skills. When I was learning leadership skills, I have had a leadership coach for the last 5 years, and on it, I don't think I'm anywhere near learning everything there is to be about it. And I'm certainly not going to sit in front of you guys and say it like I'm the best, strongest leader in the world, but I'm a damn sight better than I was, and my life's better than it was because of that. And it's directly related to the amount of time and effort I put into my leadership skills. So leadership, we're not doing a great job there. Structure and support that we can actually give our graduates, I think we do a little bit better job, and we are now starting to see and certainly in corporate practice, people building these new graduate schemes. And if you are in, actually, again, ping me in the chat box if these are a concern for you, because if you're an independent practice and you don't have one of these schemes, then that can be a problem for you when you're trying to recruit, right? Because it's one of the first things that a graduate will ask: what support and what structure is going to be there for my learning? And so we're starting to get better at that. But honestly, I think there's still a bunch of lip service kind of paid to that, because you can say, okay, I've got this awesome scheme and you're going to get all this support. But when the rubber meets the road and you're in the practice and things are busy, then time after time after time, that meeting with your new graduate or with your team, that's the thing that gets squashed, because the patient never doesn't get the time with the vet. And we can put the meeting off to another day, and suddenly a month's gone by, 2 months gone by, and we haven't done the performance review, or we haven't had the clinical meeting or the one-to-one or the coffee we should have had with our person. So we start with great intentions, but we don't always deliver. And I think the last thing on this list, the environment, is probably something that we're doing much better. As I go around and I visit practices, I think, wow, we've come such a long way, and really, we as an industry, as a profession, should be very, very proud of the amount of time, energy, investment we've put into creating great facilities, which sort of, to me, underlines just how tragic it is that the things that matter more to the team we're not doing such a good job of, simply because we don't have the training. It's not that we couldn't be good at this. It's just that we've never actually worked out what it is we ought to be doing. Okay, so I want to talk very briefly about being a good leader, because this is one of those nebulous terms, isn't it? And leadership, I think there are certain terms like leadership, engagement, that are bandied about, and we don't have the clarity we require to understand what those words mean. And actually, I think we've been taught anti-leadership by in our upbringing, and we've been taught it by people who didn't understand leadership as well. So once upon a time, we had this sort of command and control style leadership where the regard for the people in your team was relatively low, and you would just tell them what to do, and that came from factory processing. It came from military and wartime, and that was the en vogue sort of leadership style of the time. When you have a heavily male-dominated leadership layer of management within an industry, and a heavily female-dominated workforce, though, how well does this command and control thing work? And God forbid I ever tell my wife what the hell to do. I will get my head in my hands to play with. And so I think there's definitely a communication gap between there that needs to be filled, but we don't know how to fill it because we're not focused on leadership. And I think that's one of the things, I talk about it all the time on my blog. I talk about it in my podcast. And so I'm going to talk about it a little bit here. And this is just a little snippet. These are some of the things I think are super important. If you want to be a good leader, if you want to have an engaged team, then, the previous slide about thinking about your team's needs is a super important thing to start with. But here are 6 things you can do. And think of this like a drum kit, okay? There's 6 drums and you just whack them. And if you start whacking them, and I don't care if you start doing it in a fairly random way to start with, okay? But if you just get started on these things, then you're going to make a difference and you're going to be a stronger leader, okay? So the first thing is, we hire people in, but we almost never give them clear objectives or set expectations of what we expect them to do. So we hire a vet, we bring them into our practice, we set them loose. If they're lucky, they get a day of training on how to work the computer system, maybe introduction to who's who, and then we let them go. But we don't tell them, okay, what standard do we expect them to work to? We don't tell them what revenue we expect them to generate. We don't tell them what our standards of care are. And often we don't have these things mapped out at all. So if we don't have clear expectations, no wonder we're so uncomfortable when we get into performance management conversations. Because if you haven't set somebody an expectation of what good looks like, how the hell can you judge them against that expectation and expect them to think that was fair? There is the foundation, the reason why almost all performance management conversations go awry. And Paul just pinged up in my chat box there, is this about working on your business, i.e. your people? And I put in systems there as well, Paul, and not in it. You're absolutely right. This is about taking time away from the coalface to learn these skills and to take some time to work on your team. Absolutely. So number 2 there is quality training. Okay, now, again, this is probably an area that we can do quite well. We are blessed with an abundance of very, very good continuing education sources, but it happens in-house as well. Again, in the practices I've worked in the past, when people were neutering a dog, and so they're going to do a bitch spay, and you've got 15 different vets, and they're all doing the procedure in a different way. They're using different suture materials, they're using different numbers of clamps, and of course, is that the best way for quality? Absolutely not. Like, we know time and time and time again that it's find one way that everyone agrees to that works best for you guys, and then do it, practice it, and do it over and over again. That requires the clear expectation and then training. So training can be in-house as well as out-house, not this willy-nilly, oh, someone has decided they want to go on an ultrasound course, but actually we have an ultrasound machine that sucks and generates images that looks like a blizzard up a mountain in Colorado, and you're going to go away and train on like £100,000 machine with a cardiology expert where everything looks easy, and then come back and expect to get value out of that. Of course, it's not going to happen. So clear expectations, deliver quality training, give access to that, and support mastery of something. Now, for me, this means focusing on something till you get better. And I think it was Malcolm Gladwell talked about this concept of doing something 10,000 times to master it. Now, to me, that seems like a big number. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at dentals. And I say I wouldn't be that far off doing 10,000 of them. But I'm also pretty good at keyhole surgeries, certainly neutral rings. And I've done about 300 or 400 of those. So the point is, we have a scattergun approach to learning. And if you as a leader let your team have a scattergun approach to that, then they're not going to ever master any one skill, but instead having a strategic viewpoint. Okay, this is what the practice needs. This is what I'm going to hire people to try and meet that need. And then I'm going to train the bejesus out of them until they're good enough and they own that skill set within the practice. That's going to give you great outcomes. And people feel great. Like, how good, like, we all love doing things that we're good at, right? So sure, when you're bringing in new graduates, they're going to want to taste and experience everything. But really, if they want to accelerate quickly, they should focus in on something that gets some quick wins. And I'm completely biased toward dentistry here, by the way, because there's so much of it for them to do. There's an enormous case volume that they can get skills happening and experience happening instantly. And they've got 42 different bites of the cherry, no pun intended, in a dog's mouth. So there's a lot of opportunity for them to learn. They can master that skill quickly, which makes them feel good about being a vet, which makes them start to feel confident about themselves, which can then translate into skills and confidence in other areas. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Now, autonomy. So we've set a clear expectation. We've given them training. Now, when it comes to managing people, you have check-ins. Okay, so you say, okay, this is our objective. What do you need to achieve that objective? Okay, you need X, Y, and Z. Great. Let me make sure that happens for you. When can we check in and see how you're getting on? 2 weeks' time? Perfect. Okay, let's do that. And then you get out their face and you let them do it. Okay, assuming they're not disarming a nuclear bomb under your nose, that's okay to do. So you get them to the point where they're confident enough and capable enough that there's not going to be a disaster, and then you let them get on with it, and then you check back in. So now we're moving into the land of coaching. Okay, completely alien to most veterinary practices though, because it takes time, and that's why, again, Paul, coming back to your point about working on your business, not in it. If you're always at the pit face, you're the one always doing the surgery, you will never have the time to have these conversations, and it's damaging. Okay, it's not being a good leader. It's been a good veterinarian for your patients, but it's been a lousy leader for your team, and that's causing us problems. Okay, and then when somebody does a good job, recognize them. That can be a high five, like I am, which may come as no surprise to you at all, an outrageous high fiver in the practice. Like, if I don't go home with sore palms, I feel like I've really had a poor day. And so when somebody does something, it's just about recognizing them and high-fiving them metaphorically or whatever, and then rewarding them. So if somebody's upskilled and is now a significant asset to your practice, then you can give them a pay raise. You can send them a bunch of flowers. You can send them on a course. You can take the whole team out for lunch, dinner, all of these things. But if you're driving people hard and you just use the rewards thing as a patch for poor leadership, like, I have people come ask me about, okay, can you come help me with my practice? We're doing everything right. We have fresh fruit on demand. We take them to the movies. We do all these things, but we still can't get our staff turnover rate down. It's like, you're rewarding, you're giving people things almost as a guilt. It's like the parent that shouted at their child and then buys them a toy. Like, the basic thing is to not have to shout at them in the first place. And this is what leadership is about. Okay, set clear expectations and just work through that list. I promise you, you will not find that time wasted. Okay. So it's only by understanding our people and really drilling into what they want and need that we can create a future. And when I say a future, I mean a practice environment, a culture where they thrive, because it's when they thrive, then you won't feel like you have to have your foot on the accelerator all the time, because your team will start upskilling and you can start working more strategically. Everyone can be available to do the great workups. The care your patients receive improves. Everything just works better when you work as a leader. Okay, so we're getting into the tail end of this. And by the way, I will hang around. If you've got questions, please ping them in the chat box, and we will definitely get to those. No problems whatsoever. Okay, so there's lots of time for that. Oh, I have lots of time for that. I appreciate you may not. So I'm going to try and end this on time, and I'll hang around for question and answer. And so I want to be respectful of your time as well. Okay, so some tools in your hands. All right, so I'm going to point you to a couple of things, okay? Things I've been working on, but I want to give you the principles of them as well, so you can make your choice as to what you do with this. And the first thing I think is super important is, and this is coming back to our structure, okay? So we've talked about leadership. I'm not going to talk about environment at all. This is all about creating structures that maximize your chances of having a great outcome for your new graduates. And actually, if you put these things in place, you'll have great outcomes for all of your team as well, because they're completely transferable skills. It's not an age-related thing. So it'll work for a 22-year-old or a 42-year-old or a 72-year-old. Okay, so one of the first things I worked on when I came back to UK was a package which is for performance management of graduates. Okay, and it was starting with induction. So I was asked to create this package, and so what we did was I created a template for the things that we should be looking at in induction, completely editable. But the things that I've commonly built up over the years and thought, okay, this is coverable. These are the skills people need to know. They're essential to know to come work in a practice that I run. And I think that most of you would agree with that list. I'm not going to put the documents up here just now, but just to give you the gist, and I'm sure you can create these things yourself if you want to. So it's a tick list basically of everything we're going to cover off in induction, and then alongside that, I created a schedule, and the schedule so it was 2 weeks, so it's 10 days, and it's 8 hours a day. That again, that's adjustable to how long you have people in your practice, and it dropped in every item from that list into a section in that schedule, so as that if we were going to train on practical skills, there was like a 2 hour slot available for, okay, these 2 hours, we're going to look at how we do urinalysis, how we do cytology, what slides, what stains, all of that stuff we use, okay? There were sections for shadowing other team members. There were sections for learning our basic surgical protocols, whether it's for dental extractions or for neutering operations. All of that stuff was in there, so it covered your first 2 weeks. And by the end of that was your induction phase. You can decide, okay, this person is now hitting their straps and they're ready to move into, I can let them loose as a vet within my practice now, or you can decide to keep them in an induction phase. That's a decision for you. Most vets don't get that though. Okay, most vets get dropped in at the deep end and lucky to get priceless training, and that's a huge mistake because it sets people off in a stressful way, in a pressurized way, and it says to them, "I haven't thought this through. I don't care about you. I'm just going to chuck you in." Okay, I just don't think that's an acceptable way to bring people into practices, and it's not just me that thinks that. And actually, I'm the least important person to think that. It's your graduate that won't think that. Okay, so set yourself up for success with a good induction period. And then the year that comes after that, you then need a checklist. And in the UK, we have the Royal College has a professional development phase, which I think is useful. But what I decided to do was document out all of the skills that I think graduates in year one should build up in general practice. And again, it was just a checklist. And the checklist is, okay, have we done the basic training in that skill? Is that skill being done on its own, and is it mastered? And then on another column, what training is required? So you can refer back to that. And here's the beauty. You then dig that list out, and that is totally based on the caseload that's coming into the practice. You can't control it, and I strongly suggest you don't try and write lectures to teach them how to do dentistry and blah blah, because you're not vet school 1.2. You're the business world, and so you're showing them everything practical hands-on skills. And so you use that checklist and you just sit down with them and you put it in your diary. This is super important. It has to go on your clinical diary or your personal diary, and preferably both. 2 weekly check-ins where you sit down away from the practice if you can with a coffee and you talk about your experiences and you start ticking off this list and you do some clinical situational coaching, and that's going to be a massive benefit for your time. Okay, now all of that might sound P plates for new graduates, Paul. Exactly. Love it. That might sound like a pain in your backside to create that, and it does take some time. It took me 10 years to put all these things together. Okay, the people that decided that came to me and said, "Hey, have you got anything to work on this?" Now I'd just gotten back to the UK, and I said, "Well, as it happens, I do." We're VetSure. Okay, now this is not a VetSure sponsored webinar, and I'm being paid absolutely nothing I've done this for VetSure. I'm being paid everything I'm ever going to get paid by VetSure for this. But two reasons I dropped their name in here. One, Ashley Gray, the managing director, is one of the most forward-thinking and sharpest minds in the veterinary business, and I rate what he does highly. So I'm very, very happy to give him a completely free endorsement. And two, you get it for free if you like all of those materials. And I've done like an hour and a half's worth of training videos on how to do induction training and how to do performance management for new graduates. Is completely free of charge if you're a VetSure accredited practice. So if you are already in that network, it's already available to you. Have a chat to the team. If you're not in a network, have a chat to Ashley and his team and think about joining. And if you're a part of another buying group, or if you're not in the UK, let me know. Ping me an email. hello@drdavenichol.com, and I'm going to bundle this up as a standalone product. It's going to be very inexpensive, probably a couple £100 or something. You can have access to those as white label products and use them as you see fit. So that's the first thing. That's your structure for clinical coaching and getting them the skills and the support they need. Okay, so that's great. Love it to start with, but I don't think that's far enough. Okay. One last thing I would actually say there, that VetSure are running third-party endorsement. And the cool thing about that is when enough practices sign up, they're going to put people in vet schools and tell them about the graduate-friendly practice. So if you've got one of those little logos on your website, then there's probably some benefits coming your way. But let me tell you about another program that I've set up that I'm super excited. And you guys are the first people to hear about it. It's called VetX, which is short for Veterinary Graduate Accelerator Program. Okay, so VetX is an idea that I conceived a number of years ago, and I've just brought to fruition. And it seems like all of these things start with good intentions, right? We're going to bring a graduate in, we're going to give them a great experience, we mean to do well, and then real life hits, we get busy, and none of it happens. Okay, now I've experienced this as well in my own veterinary programs in the early days, so I am completely and utterly empathizing with that position. What VetX is a structured training program delivered by a third party, namely me, that is going to be open for maximum of 50 graduates. Now, probably going to have to be in the Northern Hemisphere in terms of time zones, and preferably in the UK at this instance. But they're going to be lecture programs delivered by me talking about things that are not taught at universities, but I think are massively important when it comes to practice life. And frankly, you don't have the time or the space or the energy to talk about these things. We're talking about time management. We're talking about communication skills. We're talking about resilience skills. We're talking about leadership skills. Yes, I believe everyone in a practice is a leader. And can benefit from knowing those skills because really they're relational skills. We're talking about how to generate money, talking about money in general. Like if you've generated some, what do you do with it to pay off your student debt? What do you do with it to become wealthy enough to own your own house in the future? These things are all massively important things that are completely underserviced, and we do our graduates a disservice by letting them find it out by trial and error. So it benefits your practice to have somebody building up the skill base through those 12 lectures. Component 2 of the module 2 of the VetX program is we've got a large community group, so 50 of the peers will be in there, all able to share in a completely private space. So you as a practice owner won't be allowed to see that. But that allows them a safe space for sharing problems, challenges, wins, and I'm going to moderate, and that's where most of the mentoring will happen. Now, what we're going to do is pull out the top ideas that are coming out of there, or the top problems that are coming out of there, and then again, once a month, we will have hot seats where we dissect the problem, and I will help them problem solve with a view to building up a playbook. So this moves into module 3, which is a playbook of all of the things that they encounter that are common problems and how they should handle those. So my hope is that by the end of it, they'll have 10 to 20 when X happens, Y is a good solution type diaries written down in their diary, solutions in their diary, so they can refer to them. And that is their playbook, setting them up for career success. And element 4, I very briefly passed through it, but they're the hot seats. So they're going to get at least 24 sessions with me, at least an hour and quite probably 2. They're going to get taught how to journal and how to use journaling as an essential component of resilience and also reflective learning. They're going to get access to a network, a support group of 50 other graduates, and they're going to build up this playbook. That's what VetX is about. And that, if that is used alongside, like if you just did that in the practice, if you made that available to them, well, then you're ticking a lot of graduate boxes and you're going to keep them happy in any case. But if you can do the clinical coaching using the performance framework I talked about 5 minutes ago, then boy, you're not just going to be making a new graduate happy. The purpose of all of this isn't to make a new graduate happy. The purpose is several-fold. It's to get your new graduate to a level of performance where they are not just not costing you money, but they're profitable. They're doing great medicine with confidence, so the patients are benefiting and they're happy. Because if all of that's happening, you're starting to put in a very important piece of the jigsaw to make sure you've got a happy team. Okay? So monthly teaching, part of the community, monthly mentoring, journal and playbook, and they're getting that support network and learning opportunity. Okay? You can do all of that yourself. I would estimate that if you're going to write those lectures, assuming you're a great presenter, that's going to take up at least 5 to 10 hours on a very conservative basis for each of the lectures alone. You're going to have to make the time for then monthly mentoring meetings, which are different to coaching meetings. And my bet is this makes no financial sense for you to do. And even if you thought you could do it, the chances are you're going to not do it because time is just going to get past you. So that's why I set up VetX, because I've been in your shoes and I found the frustration. If you're interested, drdavenichol.com/VetX. That's an application form there. I'm only taking 50 places in this 2017 class because I want to get it right. I want to give them great support and great attention. There are 900 graduates in the UK graduating alone. And this is the first time I've publicly spoken about this project. 8 places are already sold to people who have found out about it just through chats or conversations. So like almost 20% of the places are going, and this will be going out to the VetSure network in the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested, that's the cost. $995 is a one-time payment for all of that, or if you want to split the cost out, it's £99 per month. I think that's a steal. I'd love your comments, feedback, opinion, anything like that on that. If you're seeing value in something like that, let me know. Okay. So that's the VetX. Now, I just finally want to share some data with you on what happens when you invest time and energy into the new graduates. Okay, so this is data I've pulled out from my management software, and this was a graduate that we took on, and initially they weren't getting the best level of support. Okay, and then the red arrow is where we started. So it's basically week 1 in the year, new year came along, and we started these programs, and this is what sort of happened to their performance. So you can see the green line is sort of the target, and that's benchmarked over a lot of practices. That's what the expectation on number of bloods that would be done. is. And the blue line's what happened to the performance when we started doing the program. So you can see the bloods have this huge spike. The X-rays, which are sort of non-existent, taper off. They also go up. Cytology, which was almost non-existent, bounced up. And then the average transaction value. And by the way, I hate average transaction value as a measure of performance. This software is one of the things they provide. But it's still interesting that nothing else is changing and you see that bounce up. Now, I think that's impressive to get that out of a new graduate. But the other thing you'll note here, if you move further along the line, I don't know if you can see my arrow cursor is right here. What's that all about? That is somebody not taking holiday for 6 months. You can see the rebound right after they get back, it pops back up again. So the other thing is give them a rest because they're fragile, our new graduates, you know. And I personally, you know, create a culture they want to work in. Don't make them work 48, 50-hour weeks. They're going to break. You should not have the expectation just because you did it that that's okay, because it's just not the way people are wired together anymore. And you can fight it as long as you like, but you're fighting a losing battle. I would aim for 38 to 40 hours. I think that's a fair amount of work and time off. And pay them a reasonable amount so they can actually live something away, okay? Because if you put this time and this training into them, then it's going to pay itself back. And I absolutely guarantee you that, okay? So it just isn't a matter of chance unless we leave it to being a matter of chance. And some of you will have had great graduates who thrived, okay? I didn't get this level of support when I was a graduate, and I did thrive, but I've also looked after enough vets and seen enough graduates struggle and suffer to know that most don't. And that's the reason 10% of them are leaving the profession after 5 years. And if I looked at my peer group, after 10 years, there was probably 2 of us left in general practice, as in available within the general practice pool for recruitment. Everyone else had either gone into academia, some other area where they got a better work-life balance, or left the profession completely. And that's out of 10 close friends. So it's no wonder we're having a problem hiring people, right? And the power is ours to do something about that. So let's take that, okay? I'll leave you with a quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay, we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. I think that's kind of powerful stuff. So, folks, thank you. I totally appreciate your being on. I hope that I've given you some food for thought and some light bulbs going off there. You can never fix or change a business in an hour, but I wanted to give you some value. And I think with VetX, I can make an absolutely huge impact on your business and the way that you are able to hire people in the future by telling them that you're offering part of this program. Okay, so join up to VetX, and I think you'll see an impact for your people, your practice, your profession, and actually for you as well. Now, I'm getting some questions coming in there. Will I do something for US clinics at some point? Stephanie, I'm willing to take anybody on this program. You might struggle with the live webinars, but all of the webinars will be recorded and put into a membership area. So everybody has access to them, and they will have access to them for the whole year. At the end of the year, I'm going to download all those webinars and to put them onto a data stick and make them available for everybody to download onto the computers. So if you are in a different time zone, then the webinars are going to be in the evening, so they're probably okay to attend for some time zones. I appreciate for others it's not going to work out that way, but yes, predominantly I'm aiming at a UK market for number one. If it goes well here, I would love to set up a similar program in Australia and in North America, but I'll prefer to walk before I run, if that's possible. However, I'm extremely confident, and the lesson plans are all mapped out. If you go to, let me ping back to the link there. So drdavenicol.com/vetx, then I've got the full list of webinars that I'm planning on teaching people, and so you'll be able to have a little look there and get a better feel for exactly what the content of the course is. But I've thought about this and I've been delivering it for a while, so I feel confident that it's going to deliver the goods for whoever's enrolled. So I'm super excited to do that. Okay, so keep pinging your questions in the chat box. I will hang out to about 2:30. I do have a little daughter to pick up from school after that, so I will have to buzz off there. But if you've got questions, ping them at me. Very, very happy to answer those. Um, I've got a couple of people putting their hands up, and one of them I think was a mistake. Someone just pinged me. So yeah, that was a mistake to put the hand up. Liz, as I said, I don't know if you were on earlier. I'm just a little concerned I might crash the webinar room if I try and have anybody else speaking. Liz. I had a great conversation with Liz earlier. Liz, can you ping your website into the chat box for me, and I will give you a big plug because Liz is doing some interesting stuff and is putting together some cool resources that I think you can benefit from. As well. So let's ping that into the chat box if you're there. That'd be kind of cool. Stephanie asks, "Hey Dave, how do you suggest for managers to try and get vet owners to get out of patient time and put time into working on the people?" It's always a hard dynamic, Stephanie, because how do you manage the boss, and the risk there is in getting fired by the boss. Look, I think that the first thing is sometimes vet owners are not the people that need to be being the HR leaders. If you catch my drift, they're not the people that are going to be the best people to have those conversations, and the best place for them is at the pit face because they've got all the connection, the relationship capital with the clients, and they're going to generate lots of work. If they're happy doing that, I don't see a massive problem with that. But if you've got an owner manager who is neglecting the time they spend with their team and there's nobody else there to train and to coach, then honestly, I think every conversation, like my strongest advice to you always is when you're going to have tough conversations, do so with compassion, do so with kindness, and do so with a proactive objective in mind. And I think we create a lot of drama in our own heads when we worry and we fret about how conversations like that are going to go. And so we create a whole lot of junk in our heads about how horrible it's going to be. And then actually, anyone that's ever had one of those conversations knows the first step's always the hardest. Once you're in the dialogue, I think if you are doing so with compassion and kindness, then generally they go decent places. The other thing, Stephanie, is to I like to get to know the person I'm going to be speaking to a little bit more. So I want to know their triggers. I want to know what motivates them. If it's money and the team's languishing and they're spending loads of money on recruitment and it's stressing everyone out, and people leave because they don't feel supported, and then the culture is bad, then that's a conversation you've kind of got to have. And often vets are data driven, so being able to present some data on how many people we lost this year, how much money it cost, presenting ideas and opinion and articles and research and reports on the benefits of being a better leader and a better coach are all very helpful. Ultimately, you are not responsible for anybody else's actions. You're only responsible for yours. So you can sort of take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. A lot of that is going to depend on how open your owner is to that. And for me, that's one of the weird things about the whole independent versus corporate thing, right? So in theory, corporate medicine should do this a lot better because it should have a lot more professional managers in there. But I think the corporate practices are growing so fast at the minute that they're struggling to keep up with their demand, and so they don't have that experienced layer of middle management or leadership. Leadership and management. What's a leader? What's a manager? Well, for me, we're all managers. Leadership is like the operating system by which the management software is delivered. Like, so you can manage in certain ways, and leadership's all about the way that you manage and how you go about it. So I think they just struggles. I hear about people in corporate practices with business, not enough business development support, so they're just on their own. So in theory, it should be easier for corporate, but it's not playing out in reality, I don't think. And in private practice, it's harder because you've got some very set in the ways older practice owners who have always done it a certain way, and that's going to be a tougher challenge. But Stephanie, honestly, I think you just have to gauge it by your principle, right? So if you're going to get sacked for that conversation, I probably wouldn't have that conversation, but I probably wouldn't work for them. And if you've got a good relationship, then you are going to go sit down, have that coffee, and present your case. And your boss has no obligation to listen to you or to act on you, but they should, as a good leader, have an obligation to listen to you. And I'm sure that you are very much more respected for what you do than to have to worry too much more about that. So if the problem is a fear factor in having a conversation, I say just get in there and have it. What's the worst that can happen? Like, if you care about this business, you're not going to get fired. And if you do, you'll find a practice that really deserves you a lot better. But for a lot of us, it's the fear factor, and it's the combat conversation thing, right? Tracy, you asked, do I have an example of the 8-hour training schedule? It's now, Tracy, it's part of the paid for products. If you're a VetSure member, Tracy, again, just remind me where you are on planet Earth, because if you're in the UK and you're a VetSure member, you can get access to it for free just by being part of the network. If you don't, ping me an email. Like, as I say, I'm not going to charge a lot for this. I want people to have these tools, but I do need to feed my family. So I will be putting together this bundled product, which has got training videos, and it's got 4 documents that you can immediately start using and will help your inductions. If you're in an urgent hiring situation where you've got somebody about to start, ping me an email to hello@drdavenicol.com. So it's drdavenicol.com. Or hit me up on Facebook as well. That's fine. So any other questions? Let me just see if I've missed any out there. Ping, 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 ping. Thank you. Lots of kind comments, which I'm very appreciative. Thank you very much. And you guys are hanging around. So if you've not got any questions, then I will bring this to a close, and I will close it. So if you've enjoyed this, if you like hearing what I've got to say, remember I do write a blog each week it's on the Hamster Wheel Business blog, and I talk about leadership, I talk about self-care, wellness, I talk a little bit about marketing, but most of the time I'm talking about managing yourself and your own emotions to become that better leader. And I'm just chronicling a lot of my journey, to be perfectly honest, and having a lot of fun doing it. So I love to connect with you on there. I also publish the Blunt Dissection podcast, where I interview highly successful people within or just peripheral to the veterinary field. We just had a great conversation from the Women's Veterinary Leadership Development Institute over in the US, and I'm very privileged to have Karen Bradley and Kim Therian on the podcast, and some of the stuff they were talking about was awesome. So we dig deep into the patterns, the behaviors, the decisions, the thought processes, the tools, the training, the books, the things that are common to people of success. I'm just trying to decode what success is a bit and spread the word on that. So look up Blunt Dissection on iTunes, and it's a free podcast. And the Facebook page is facebook.com/Dr. Dave Nicol. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Totally loved your interaction. That was cool. And I very much look forward to meeting you, or what I want you to do is send your graduates on the VetX program, and I will look after them. Great for you. Okay, so have a great afternoon. Be well, and I look forward to seeing you out in the real world at some point soon. Thanks, everybody.